always measure yourself backwards. I thought of that and I was like, you know what? Because I think of entrepreneurs, we're always looking forward. Well, I didn't get this, or I'm almost there. I can do this. Why didn't I do that? Or like if I would have course corrected and done this, instead of like taking a breath, turning around and measure back to like, holy shit, like look where I've came from. I mean, look, even just in the last year, the accomplishments we had. Now, maybe we didn't hit every single goal, but if we give ourselves just a little bit more pat on the back, like, because if we live in that gap of never feeling like we're good enough or we didn't get where we want, that's a pretty lonely and miserable gap.
I'm actually going to talk to you today from a bit of a selfish place. I've been looking at aircraft off and on for about 3 years myself. Perfect. And you are one of the market leading industry experts in the area of private jet and flying and all kinds of stuff. So talk to me a little bit about how you even got into this genre, like, you know, because it's a very niche genre, and then obviously fell in love with it.
Yeah, well, thank you. And this is my favorite part about the job is I get to talk to cool people about airplanes all day.
Rock on.
This is this is great. So to answer your question, how I got into it, growing up through high school, I wanted to be an airline pilot. And after I graduated high school, I was racing motocross and super bikes and just decided to sell cars for a couple of years to support that racing habit. And then got stuck in the car world for about 15 years, started making a lot of money. And it was like, well, gosh, I can stay here in the car world, or I can go spend $100,000 in flight school and then start at SkyWest. Back then it was like 30 grand a year. And so anyways, fast forward, I think that the car industry was the best education I could have ever asked for. I ultimately ended up owning a couple of car dealerships towards the end, partner on a Ford store, sold that, a couple of big used car dealerships. But then I still just always had this passion for airplanes. So at 21, I went to the local private flight school here in Utah, learned to fly. So I was flying a little Cessna. I bought partnership in a Turbo 210 at 22 years old, flying around, just loving it. And then kept buying and selling airplanes for fun. And then finally, like 08, 09, you know, the economy was shifting. My partners and I started not getting along as well as we did previously. I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to follow my passion and just put all my eggs in one basket. And so I sold the car dealership back and then started back then it was called CB Aviation. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing.
A typical entrepreneur. It works that way.
Yeah, I bought a list of aircraft owners and just started smiling and dialing and see if they would let me sell their airplane. And so that was 14 years ago in June. So we just celebrated that. So it's been and now we do pretty much everything in the private jet space, and I still get to fly a lot. So
that's awesome, dude. Well, no, I always love hearing the backstory because it's funny. I was telling my son one time, he's like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm like, dude, just go knock something over. Like you're going to find out what you're supposed to do by doing something. Yeah. Right? So everything kind of builds upon itself, which I thought was pretty interesting. You know, as someone who has looked at aircraft off and on, I've always, every time my flight gets delayed, because I typically fly I fly commercial right now, but I typically do first class. Obviously, because, you know, I get a free beverage and some peanuts, which is awesome. You know,
there you go. Right.
You know, and somebody like my size, I can stretch out. So it's good. But when I do that, every time I have a delayed flight or I'm waiting on someone who's being less than cooperative with the airline in front of me or behind me or whatever, it just makes the experience just not great. And as someone, at least for most of last year and the year before, I was traveling a great deal. I had some business things I need to take care of this year, so I haven't been traveling as much, but my travel schedule started to get packed again. I flirted with the idea of, okay, well, maybe at some point, maybe I should go ahead and buy a plane. So I have a lot of friends that own their own aircraft, and, you know, essentially when they're not using it, their aircraft is being used. You know, they're leasing it back to organizations to fly for them. I've got folks that use their aircraft on a regular basis. They're good friends of mine. I've got folks that just do the fractional thing where you buy some, I guess you call it like a timeshare, right? So
very similar. Yep. Yeah.
So walk me through, and I'm going to be a little selfish, and our audience will be a little selfish too. Walk me through what you think the ideal next step is if you have a net worth in the 8 figures or better.
Yeah, great question. And I would say it all comes back to, first, how much are you going to fly? There's a lot of people out there that own their own aircraft that really the economics don't make sense. They should be chartering, or they should do a fractional program. So when we have someone that's first interested in learning to fly private, that's going to, we kind of start there. You know, where do you live? How often are you going to fly? How many people and whatnot? And is it business or pleasure? And so if you're going to fly, we call it less than 6 or 7 trips a year privately, it's best just to charter. Okay. You know, you can pick what type of aircraft you want to go. You are going to pay the highest hourly rate, you know, the highest per trip expense, but then there's no upfront expense. You know, there's no buying the asset. There's no monthly or annual fixed costs of the pilot's insurance, maintenance, all the other stuff that goes along with it. And then you don't have any of the depreciation of the asset too. So when you start flying more than that 6, 7, 8 trips a year, then from there up to till about flying once a week, really the fractional space is, I think, the best bang for your buck. We have a fractional program. We do a lot of charter as well, and we also do full aircraft ownership, so we can help everybody in each of those different categories. But the fractional, like you said, a timeshare where you're only buying a portion of the asset. You buy as much as you need for usage. The more bigger share you buy, the more you get to fly it. So that's a one-time investment typically. And then it's a 5-year program. Most programs will sell their asset after 5 years and you get half your money back or thereabouts. Then you have a fixed monthly management fee, and that is shared amongst the owners to cover all the pilots, insurance, all the other stuff. And then you just have an hourly rate on the airplane. So that's a really good way to get into it. I would first try chartering a few times just to make sure, because even like that,
just to make sure you get puppy dog and get spoiled, and then you can't help yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best drug ever. I promise you that. Once you fly private, you're not going to want to do it again. Go back to the airlines, but just like going from the back of the airlines to the front of the airlines, it's expensive, you know. And this is a massive jump to fly private either way. So start charter. If you start flying enough, go fractional. And then ultimately, if you want to own your own airplane, or if you need to go at a moment's notice and you're flying a lot, then you can buy the asset, own it entirely. You can decide at that point, do I want to keep it just for me? Or do I want to have a company, like you said, charter it out and kind of offset some of those expenses? There's some people that say you can make money owning an airplane. It's just not the case. Like there may be one quarter or 1 year you might be able to do that. Like coming out this last year was one of the hottest years in the private jet history. But typically you'll be able to offset a lot of your fixed costs through chartering your airplane out, but you're never going to make money. So that's one thing is flying private. It's really expensive until you figure out what your time's worth. And that's where a lot of these bigger organizations or successful, wealthy people that have like, okay, here is what's my time is worth. And if I'm going to go visit these 3 cities for business, if I did that via the airlines, it's going to take me 4 or 5 days. And now I can do it in one day and make it that night for dinner with my family or go watch my kids' soccer game. So it's when you take that consideration of your time and also being able to bring some other employees with you or just the experiences. You know, a lot of people use this just for fun and they create amazing, epic experiences with their friends and family. And that's hard to put a price tag on.
No, absolutely. And you know, the reality is I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the world that would love to fly private on a regular basis. And I think one of the things I've always been trying to back my way into is when it actually makes good business sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to buy on emotion. It's one thing to have a fantastic trip with a bunch of friends. Like, man, I should get my own airplane. And then I started looking I went as far as having a buddy of mine send me a pro forma on his ownership. And I was like, dude, hangar fees, there's maintenance fees. I was just like, goodness gracious. And then obviously the cost of fuel. How have you guys managed to navigate controlling your costs so strongly? Because obviously that's going to be the backbone of running a successful enterprise like you guys have.
Yeah, great question. So there's some of it we can control, and then there's a lot that we can't. And so like in our fractional program, for example, one of the things that we cannot control is the fuel prices. They're going up and down all the time. And so like the other fractional companies, we'll have a set fuel rate that's baked into the hourly rate, but there's a fuel surcharge if we're going into an expensive airport like Jackson Hole or one of these mountainous airports. So some of that we'll be able to structure it there. But it's been an interesting world, I'll tell you. Just the last 2 years, our pilot salaries have gone up about 42%.
Oh, wow.
And they continue to climb. And so it's through 2020, I'll tell you, Stephen, I like for a minute there, I didn't know if we're going to make it. Like we're like, holy cow, all of our airplanes, are grounded. Everybody's, in quarantine and just sitting there. And we made our leadership team made a pact. We're like, we're not only just going to survive through this, we're going to thrive through this. And that was like our mantra as we went through COVID. And our goal was not to let go any pilots or any managers or any full-time employees. And we're able to do that. And thank God we did, because coming out of it, what happened is there was all these people that had the means to fly private before COVID, but just didn't justify it. And now they're like, you know what? I don't want to be in that tube with 300 other people. I want to go when I want to go, where I want to go with just the security and privacy of my family. And so there was this massive surge of new people flying private, which was awesome, and luckily made it through the tough time. And now we've been able to, very grateful that we've been able to experience this rise.
Well, let's talk about building teams, right? So when you go to scale a company, there's a huge aspect of hiring the right person for the right role to do the right thing at the right time. Yeah. Have you struggled with that at all, building your organization, or has that always been something that's been natural?
I think that's one of the biggest struggles of every entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And the last part you said is when to do it is the toughest part. Yeah. I think a lot of companies that fail because they go so heavy into hiring these people with all this massive experience and stuff, and there's just not the revenue coming in to justify the high salaries and whatnot. And then there's the opposite side of these entrepreneurs that try to do everything to everybody, and then they never are able to go to the next level. And so for me specifically, it was a grind. For the first 8 years, we ran very lean, and there was times we didn't know. Like, I don't have any PE money or VC money. We've bootstrapped this company from day one, and I'm glad I did that. Now, looking forward, will that change? I don't know. Maybe not. But right now, I really like that we have the autonomy to do what we want to do, and we're like a small ship that can move quickly. Back to your question, though. Finally, when I felt like we got the company to a point where I knew I needed help, or I'm just going to stay there and stay like barely treading water with a straw, just barely catching air. I went, I called one of my best friends that I'd known since 7th grade, and he had a whole different life. He went and got his master's degree into corporate America, was executive of some very large corporations. And I called him. I'm like, Tommy, I need help. Just come and look at my books. Like, I feel like I'm drowning, but I'm on this huge hockey stick trajectory. Like, we're doubling revenue every year. Like, I'm sitting on something that could be really amazing, but I need help. And through that, he came and consulted for free for about a year. In the back of my mind, I'm like, come on, I know you're going to catch the bug. And he finally did. And so for me, that was a really difficult thing, meaning because I promised myself coming out of the car world that I'd never have a partner again. But I knew, like, this company's much bigger than me now. We've got a lot of employees, and I need to find somebody that has those skill sets that I don't possess that well, and let them thrive in there, and just find like work it so he can work in his own genius and I can. And so right now he's my business partner, and we've just in the last 5 years have just had some awesome growth. We just found out last week that we hit the Inc. 5000.
Congratulations!
Time in a row, and
it's awesome, dude.
For the third time. And so, but to come back to your question, I think that is the hardest part, and sometimes ego gets involved, where the entrepreneur tries to do it all. Because 3 years ago, we didn't even have an org chart, But if we did, it would have been myself and 15 people reporting. Yeah. And with finding the right people and then getting really structured. The other thing we did for our company that was really massive was we're an EOS company, the Entrepreneur Operating System. So we really engulfed that, and we're like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do all of it. Yeah. And so now that, with the combination of Tommy, and then we've been able to hire just some amazing other team members in our leadership team, and all of our measures came together, and it's getting real clear on who we are, where we want to go, how we're going to do it, and then creating the structure and putting the right people in the right seat is crucial.
Yeah, no, I love it. In fact, I learned a long time ago, I was trying to build my own organization, that I started using a principle of 3-6-9. So three true executive leaders. It follows a biblical model. I'm a big Jesus guy. So Jesus had 3 core disciples that he poured personally into consistently, even though he had 12 disciples. Those disciples then mentored other disciples, so on and so forth. So I say 3 core executive leaders, 6 operational leaders that support the executive team but take the vision into action. And then from the 6, that you have the other 9 that I consider senior leaders or leaders we're developing to be in the next level. And that 3-6-9 approach has been incredibly helpful to us, kind of figuring out our scale, because it's like to your point. I did the same thing when it was just me and the org chart. It was me and however many circles were on the paper, right? And I was like, I'm spending great time with this person, and I'm doing well with this person, but these other 18 people over here, I barely talk to.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it gave us a foundation to actually kind of build that from. And I think the other thing that we struggled with, at least when I was building my first business, is knowing which position to hire for first. Yeah. Not even what person, right? But what position, and I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think as a strategic visionary yourself, you hired the integrator like right out of the gate.
Absolutely. And that was, so there was a book that I read called Traction that like really stuck with me and really motivated me to make those decisions. But it's like, I think as an entrepreneur, not even an entrepreneur, but anybody that really wants to increase who they are in the business world, it's like, define what you're really, really good at, figure that out. And not only what you're really, really good at, are you really passionate about that? Because if you can like combine that passion with your skill set and you put yourself in the zone of genius and then hire for the who's of everything around that. So right now, that's what I love, is like I get to fly and I run our sales teams, and it's like that's my world that I love. And then Tommy, with the rest of our team, we've got a great team that handle everything else. And so it's been a fun ride. It's not easy though. Everybody's like, you're like, look how you're doing. I'm like, God, this is 14 years of grinding.
It's there's no such thing as it happens overnight, regardless of what people see on paper. I've seen that learned and seen that the hard way building my own organizations. Curious to know, what is your next, now that you guys have this climbing success and things are climbing, no pun intended. You have all this cool stuff happening. What are your next 3 hires, out of curiosity? Like if you could choose right now, what to hire, where would you put them? Yeah,
great question. So number 1 is we want to hire a customer experience officer. Our client base is getting big enough where I never want. Let me rephrase that. So I've had one of the other clients that we sold into our fractional program. He's like, Cory, I started with NetJets a long time ago, and I felt like it was very personalized. And now I feel like I'm just a number. And I don't want any of our clients ever to feel like we're just a number. Now, we're not perfect. We stumble all the time. And we try and pick up and figure out how we stumbled and create a process so that doesn't happen. And so But the customer experience officer is I just want to have one person that person's job is to love on all of our owners. One of our main core values is to deliver the wow, because people are paying us a lot of money to fly private. Now, the expectations are already set very high. They expect a very nice jet, awesome pilots, to be safe, on time. So for us to deliver the wow, like, we need to always be thinking, what can we do to go up and beyond? And over the years, Stephen, 60% of our business has came from referrals of our current owners. So we've done a lot of things right. But so that's a long answer to say customer experience officer. And then we're really getting into the managed aircraft. So what I mean by that is, let's say you said, hey, Cory, I want to go buy a Gulfstream, and then we can help you with the buy, and then we manage it and hire the flight department, do all that stuff. And so we're really focused on that. So we're in the interview process to have one person that is just going to own all of the managed sales and be talking to the aircraft owners around the country and hopefully get them to come over with us.
Yeah, no, I love it.
And then the third, that's we're always looking for good pilots. That's
and it's competitive right now, I'm sure.
Super. Yeah. It's so weird, Stephen. This market's changing very quickly. Like, one of our big competitors just went out of business 2 months ago.
Oh, wow.
And there's another one that's a gorilla that Wheels Up. They did an IPO 2 years ago for like $10. They got up to $12, and they're down at like 15 cents right now. They did a 10-to-1 reverse, so they're showing like $1.30 if you look at the ticker. But there are 2,000 pilots. There are 300 airplanes. I mean, and it's very interesting how this
Yeah. Out of curiosity, not, we're not going to pick on Wheels Up per se, but what do you think, what do you think's driving the decline in overall value?
Well, these are just my opinions, of course, but I think the business model was never sound from the beginning. They had one goal, and even if you look at the CEO that stepped down, if you looked at his pay plan, it was 100% revenue driven. There was no profitability component on it. So it was like, let's drive revenue, and then let's take it to IPO, which they did. But that's not how you can sustain a company. You need to make money at the end of the day. So again,
no, that makes a lot of sense. Well, the reason I asked that, well, obviously we're not picking on any one airline or whatever, or business model, or business, I should say. But I want the other entrepreneurs that are watching, because a huge audience that we have is mostly entrepreneurs or C-suite professionals at some level. And what I want them to fully understand is, all because your competitor in theory is in front of you doesn't mean they're really in front of you, right? It may just be quote unquote false success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So kind of the importance of just being steady, kind of doing what you meant, you and your team mentioned, we're not going to survive through this. We're going to thrive through this. I dealt with the same thing in the construction industry, which is where a huge chunk of my businesses are. And in those terms, I remember my COO coming to me this time, the pricing's this and supply chain this and da 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 da. I'm like, dude, we have to figure it out, because at the end of this, somebody's going to dominate the space. And know about you, but I want it to be us.
Yeah.
And it's so much of that tortoise and the hare consistency approach, right? And I want to say that just because I think all entrepreneurs out there, they get into a rush. They're almost impatient with themselves. Like at least for me, I'm always thinking I'm behind, even though I'm actually pretty far ahead.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So that's why I wanted to bring it up specifically. And then obviously your business model is working. So there's things that you're doing really, really well where other companies may not be doing them as well. And again, if you can identify that, that's your unique value proposition, right? So,
yeah, on that, what you just said, I was at, I have part of another organization I go to called Strategic Coach, and I was there last week, and one of the comments that came out of there, and I'll probably butcher how it's said, but it's like, always measure yourself backwards. I thought of that and I was like, you know what? Because I think of entrepreneurs, we're always looking forward. Well, I didn't get this, or I'm almost there. I can do this. Why didn't I do that? Or like, if I would have course corrected and done this, instead of like taking a breath, turning around and measure back. Like, holy shit, like, look where I've came from. I mean, look, even just in the last year, the accomplishments we had. Now, maybe we didn't hit every single goal. Yeah. But if we give ourselves just a little bit more pat on the back, like, because if we live in that gap of never feeling like we're good enough or we didn't get where we want, it's a pretty lonely and miserable gap. So anyway, I really like that. I was like, okay, I'm going to take that.
I mean, in that zone, if we stay in that zone, we make insecure decisions, which are never great for the business, especially long term. Never great for the team. It tends to produce, the most negative type of leadership out of us that it could possibly be. I know one of the things that you and I share is that we have we're vision minded all the way to the point of having a quasi vision board, or, just things that we do to remind us of where we're going. But my first mentor told me a long time ago, he's like, never lose sight of where you're going, but it's just as important to never lose sight of where you've been, kind of thing. So you have the anchor that really sets the hook for humility. So that way you're able to proceed in humble confidence. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Humble confidence. That's the way to do it too.
Rock on. Well, look, I want to pick your brain on a couple of aircraft just for fun.
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to give you 3 aircraft. Okay. These are ones that I've researched myself, and I still don't know enough about them to know if I ever want to buy one fractional or whatever. The first one that I just love the way it looks. Now, again, that would be the emotional side of me talking, right? Is the Phenom 300.
I knew you were going to say that too.
just the tips, right? The next one's the Nextant 400 XTI.
Yeah.
Followed by the Cessna Citation CJ3 Plus.
Okay.
So walk me through the features and benefits of those aircraft, and maybe what makes the most sense. Yeah.
So I haven't flown the Nextant, but I've flown the CJs. I'm type rated to fly the CJs single pilot, and I've flown the Phenoms as well. We manage a couple of Phenoms here. So first again, what's the mission, right? How many people, where are you going, how often? The Phenom will go a little bit farther than the CJ and a little bit faster and hold more people. Both the CJ and the Phenom can be flown single pilot. The Nextant always requires 2 pilots. The Nextant would be my third choice out of all of those.
Really?
So what the Nextant is they took a older airframe of a Beechjet 400 and then they put it through a full overhaul. So they put new avionics in it. They put Williams engines on it. So it was faster and more fuel efficient. But still, a lot of those moving parts in that airplane are 20 years old. So it's a nice size cabin, and it's a lot of airplane for the money. But I would, if I were to rate the airplanes, I would Phenom first, the CJ 3 Plus or CJ 4, and then I would put the PC 24 in that category before looking at the Nextant.
Interesting.
So the Phenom 300. So I fly.
Why did you think I was going to choose the Phenom 300 out of the gate? Out of curiosity,
they're just sexy. Everybody loves it.
It is a sexy aircraft.
They've sold more of those light jets than any other light jet, and for good reason.
Oh, wow.
They're about around 850 of those airplanes. I've been lucky enough to go pick up 2 of them brand new from the factory. Went through the whole delivery experience and then got to fly them back here to Utah to our clients, which was a really cool deal. The Phenom, so I fly Pilatus's a lot too, the PC-12 turboprop, and have more time in that aircraft than anything else. And so I always thought the PC-24, which is the jet of the Pilatus, was going to be my dream airplane. I was like, that's on the vision board, like that's going to be the airplane. Till I started flying the Phenom 300, and then it's like now it's a 50-50. So one of our
so you get a quarter.
Either one. I mean, I'd be happy. I would love to fly both of them, actually. Yeah. We had one of my clients that was debating between the two. And so we had both factories bring out a new one. We flew the Phenom to Vegas, and then we had the PC-24 fly us back. And it was like flip of a quarter. So those 2 airplanes are just magnificent. The CJ3 is less money than the other 2. Still does a good job. There's a ton of them out there. There's a ton of good pilots, very safe airplane. So nothing wrong with them. They just, the Phenom or the PC.
That's why I like asking preference, right? You know, it's especially when you start talking aircraft. I mean, I opened it's not Pandora's box with me, but I first started dabbling and looking. I mean, there are great aircraft all over the place. 4, 6, 8, 10. You get to some of the what I call jumbo planes. They're not jumbo in consideration to an airliner per se. Of course, I guess you could go up that far.
Yeah, they do. Boeing business jet, a BBJ, is basically a 737, 4757 converted.
So and digging in, I'm always curious that the people that fly the aircraft on a regular basis or own the aircraft on a regular basis, what made them choose that aircraft, or what makes them kind of like one aircraft or the other aircraft. Right. It's always really good to kind of get an understanding, because this is probably a couple of years ago, I was looking at a used Phenom, and I want to say this is what surprised me. I looked at it 1 month, and I looked at it like 6 months later. 1 month it was like 3.2 or something. I forgot the hours that it had on it. The next time I looked at the same aircraft, it was almost 6.
Yeah.
It seems like the aircraft values go literally up and down. Like you'd actually own the aircraft. It could be high now, low tomorrow, and high again. Is that accurate?
You're exactly spot on. So like 07, right before 08, 09, so like 07, airplanes were appreciating. Then we went through that crash and they kind of reset. And that happened again last year. These airplanes were literally appreciating. The Phenoms that we picked up from the factory, we paid $2 million over asking price.
Oh, wow.
Our clients,
somebody did
not to wait in line, because the line was 2.5 years to order a new one. And so they're like, we're going to pay now. We're going to get it. Now the market shifted and prices are coming back down. So it was very inflated over the last year. And they're, again, luckily coming back down, and normal transactions are happening again. But you're exactly right. The hardest part about when you're looking to buy an airplane is finding one that's going to do all your missions. It's impossible. So when we say, hey, if we can find one airplane that does 80% of your missions, that's the unicorn. That's awesome. Yeah. Like let's have that be the goal. And then for the other 20%, we can charter, you can do something else. Yeah. That is another thing that a lot of these fractional programs like ours are also unique, is because you own in one airplane, but with our program, you can fly different types. So you could take a PC-12 one day to a grass strip. You could get in the Gulfstream and go to Hawaii the next day, or you could take the Citation and go to a business meeting in Tulsa, whatever. And so that gives you a lot of aircraft options, which
without maybe the expense of taking a long range aircraft to a short range destination.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. All right. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical: 30 flights a year within the United States. Could go east, could go coast to coast, depending from time to time. All right. So 30 flights a year, coast to coast possibilities, more mid to coast. So whether on the East Coast or West Coast, flying to more of the kind of like maybe Utah, Nevada, Denver, Kentucky, like that kind of like, in that zone. You like the Phenom 300, like as a traditional, like that's just the aircraft you like.
Yeah.
And you're looking at a fractional thing. What type of program, or you look like what would be the features and benefits given that model?
And where would the base be?
Currently would be, we'll call it Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where I'm at until I make my butt to Salt Lake.
There we go. Awesome.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful here. You got to come.
So Randy and I have an ongoing conversation. There's ongoing things happening. So
nice. So our fractional program, it really is only for people that live in the Western 11 states. We do our charter and we do aircraft management anywhere. But living out there, PlaneSense does a really great job. They're a fractional company that runs PC-12s and then the PC-24. AirShare is another really good fractional company that services that area. They have Challenger 300s as their super mid, and then they have Phenom 300s. So there's your Phenom 300. Our aspirations are a couple of years. We're going to start moving east, but we're not there yet. But if you were to take it down to one single airplane, a Phenom's not going to make it coast to coast without a fuel stop. So as long as you're okay with a fuel stop, that airplane will do it. And it's interesting. So just to throw some numbers out there. If you didn't want to charter your airplane, you wanted to go buy a Phenom, for example, your fixed costs with two pilots on a Phenom are going to be roughly around $450,000 to $500,000 before you start it. That's just pilots, insurance, hangar, all that stuff. When you go to the next category of aircraft, like up to a super mid of like we run a bunch of Gulfstream G200s or a Challenger 300, you're close to $1 million a year before you start it.
Jeez.
And that's where it's
now. I assume these expenses are tax deductible, either through depreciation.
And especially you still right now you get 80% bonus depreciation too. So so if you have a tax, there's a lot of people buying airplanes for a tax strategy instead of writing a check to Uncle Sam. So that's why it's like there's so much difference in the.
That's why I figured I'd ask the airplane genius. I
don't know about genius, but I love
what works. So that's awesome, dude. Well, look, man, I've enjoyed hanging out with you and getting to know you some. Where can everybody find out more about you, more about the business, all that good stuff?
Yeah, skyshare.com. And then also on all the social media platforms. And we'd love to talk airplanes. So anybody can reach out anytime.
Awesome. Cory, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate you big time.
Thanks, Steven. Have a great day.
All right, take care.
See ya. Bye-bye.
I hope you liked that video. And if you did, make sure you check out this next video right here.
So I was a surfer until I nearly died. I had a real close call with almost dying at 17. And that led me to a health food store, led me to a yoga class. And that's where I met Paul Bragg.